Hey everybody, welcome to the daily COVID-19 update. This is Michael with Reconciled. I'm here with Jacob Schroeder of Ascend Consulting, Amy Walker CPA, Chris Macksey of Prefix Accounting, and Dan Luthi of Ignite Spots. And we are here today to give you an update on PPP loans, SBA funding, etc., etc. Some of you may have woke up yesterday or this morning looking at your personal bank account and saw a surprise deposit from the IRS, and some of you are still waiting for that money. So these are a surprise. Yes, the IRS did start processing direct deposit payments this week, and so lucky you if you got some funds, and if you did it, you might either be receiving a check because the IRS doesn't have your direct deposit info, or you don't qualify because you passed the threshold based off your 2018 or 2019 funds. And so that was an interesting update this week. The other is about how should you track your PPP funds. That's what we're going to focus on today. And so the beautiful Amy Walker is going to cue us up for this conversation about tracking your PPP loan funds for forgiveness.
Are you ready for that part already?
Yes. Yes,
that's what you call a pregnant pause right there. I was lamenting with the guys before we jumped on the camera that I feel like Chase is never going to ask me to the prom, and I feel like they're never going to ask my clients to the prom, and we're just sitting here waiting, and we're never going to get to go to the prom with Chase. I followed the rules, and I got on their mobile website this morning and booked a phone appointment with their business department, and I was locked and loaded for 12:30, 1:30, 2:30. 3:30 came and went, and my phone never rang. So, not only are they not funding money, but they're not returning phone calls, even if you book an appointment. So interesting day. I'm feeling a little rejected by Chase, but looking forward.
Only Chase though, that you're feeling rejected by?
Well, yeah. Is somebody not asking you to the prom?
I feel like there's these really exciting banks that got, these new ones that are kind of connected to all the fun apps and everything like that. And they're now crazily overwhelmed. Like all these different things from that standpoint. And so like Cross River Bank, I'm sure is just like drowned in applications because there's 32 different softwares connecting to them and feeding into their process. And I think the part that and again, this is, it's all speculation, but I think this, in my mind, part of this is there's no like true funnel process, right? If I applied right now and then Jacob applied right after, if we applied at two different banks, we're not one right after another in the queue. We're probably over like this in the process because, well, his bank may have less applications that they're processing, and so they can move it quicker than my potential bank that I went with. And so I think it's kind of a damning process, almost a little bit, depending on who you chose to go with and processing everything through your. So I'm feeling a little deflated. Some of my customers are really hurting right now, and I feel terrible for them from that standpoint.
And I'll to put us on record, so why we're feeling like we're not being taken to prom, we got stood up, is for Marco Rubio today, and there were some other people, but I think his was the latest at 4:20 tonight. We were at a little over 300 billion approved of PPP loans. Congress approved 349 billion to guarantee, and 10 billion of that needs to go to processing fees to the banks. So we're down to about 39 billion left out there to be approved. So we're feeling like the likelihood of our clients getting it that have not is getting slimmer and slimmer without additional funding coming along. And I think all of us feel this, and it's not, I'm going to put the stake in the ground and say, yes, our community banks have came through in a major way in a lot of cases, but I also have apps sitting at community banks that are not approved. So it's not like this is only chasing those that are leaving people out to dry, it's going to be felt all over.
Okay, well, let's talk about the people that are getting money.
Let's shift to a better topic than that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You got your money. Now what do you do?
We have about 50 clients at our firm, and I have one that's received their funding. And so I want to be able to make sure that my team is ready to go from the beginning. So we kind of feel like maybe there's going to be 3 situations with that. We're getting down to nuts and bolts bookkeeping. So your money's come in and it's in a separate bank account. So that's the easiest, most straightforward way. In a perfect world, any type of employee or payroll, rent, or utilities would be flowing out of that account too. But let's talk about that's not really realistic. A lot of us use payroll providers that it takes, it's an arm and a leg to switch which account they're drawing from. So say, guys, I'll tee this out there. What would you do? You have the funds in a separate savings account. You're starting to cycle through operations. How would you do those daily transactions to be able to cover yourself?
So yeah, one of the recommendations, and some of the banks are making their clients do this, is they're opening up a new bank account for their clients and putting the money in there. And we literally are having the payroll providers change the bank account that they draft payroll from to draft directly from those funds, since the primary use of those funds will be for payroll usage in regards to tracking it for forgiveness. So that's one first step, is to literally put the funds in a separate bank account and then update your payroll provider to track the next 8 weeks of payrolls runs to run through that account. And if you run short, transfer money over to that new account. And if you have other forgivable costs you want to spend out of that, like rent or mortgage interest, that you write checks or make payments out of that new bank account.
Okay, so that's the cleanest, most straightforward way.
So my concern in that is we do have non-covered expenses in that auto draft of the bank account, which is why we have not went that route, because we don't want those to auto draft. So what we are doing is leaving those in a separate account. And then when we go to run payroll, we're calculating the covered payroll costs and executing a transfer from the PUP account over to the normal account. That way you don't have to worry about non-covered expenses in there. And we are doing those by payroll. And then as we have rent, utilities, we're also executing a transfer for each one of those. That way it's transaction by transaction, because we are trying to make it super simple for the bank employee that has to certify that these were spent on forgivable expenses when it comes time for forgiveness. So I want that bank statement to list out like each transaction and what it was for, and them just to be able to be like, oh yeah, this is clean, rubber stamp, let's move on.
Yeah, I like that idea. Okay, so Dan, you've got a client and they're like, no, for 2 months, we're not opening up another account, it's going in the operating account. How would you maybe use classes or something like that to track it?
Yeah, my thought with there is to try to class every transaction as much as possible. Theoretically make figurative transfers from one thing to another so that we can see that money moving as we're going to, or associate and add additional detail to the payroll expense allocations, so that we can be able to track what specific benefit those items were for. There's a lot of complexity that goes along with that by using classes. If you already are using classes in your QuickBooks file, this is where like tags would be awesome, to have some functionality with that. If there is a GL software out there that utilizes tags really well, this could be a great option to be able to do line item detail and add it to that functionality as you go through it. But I think that's another big piece that goes along with it, is making sure that it's tracking correctly. But to Jacob's comment as well, I think now that a lot of payroll providers have done such a good job tracking and providing payroll packets for people to apply for the PPP, we kind of need them now also to help us start working on some sort of report that shows the reconciliation of what was applicable to the PPP as well over that period of time. Now, luckily, we have, for some people who've received money right now, 8 weeks ultimately, maybe even a little bit longer before they have to validate that information. So we have some time. It's not going to be as much of a rush, but I think that would actually add a lot of help and benefit. Outside of that, honestly, if you have a really complex accounting system and you don't want to transfer it and create a new bank account, the old pen and paper works too. I know it sounds stupid, but pen and paper or some sort of Excel document that says, this is how much we got, and we're only using these funds for this specific purpose, and you can organize that in your own way, is totally another option to go through it. I think, in my mind, as long as someone is tracking it to the penny on what they're moving, whether it's physically moving or not physically moving, you're going to be better prepared than people who just kind of go by the seat of their pants and run business as normal.
What were you gonna say, Chris? It looked like you had a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, the other option is if you actually treat the thing like a restricted grant. And this obviously requires quite a, some understanding of like nonprofit bookkeeping, but you could treat it like a restricted grant and then journal entry all of it out so that you can track it that way and keep the funds all in one place. But that is one of the more complicated ways to do that. And if you're a business owner that's doing it yourself, that would be pretty cumbersome to have to learn that if you don't have any experience with it.
Yeah. If you do decide to go the class route, just remember you'll be able to run a balance sheet by class. You'll be able to isolate. I'm coming from a QuickBooks Online perspective here. So, you'll have to know the right terminology for whatever software you're using, but, you'll run that balance sheet by class. You should be able to drill down then into the cash account, and it should only contain the transactions that were marked with that class. So that would be a nice reconciliation right there. Hopefully when you get to the end of it, you've netted it down to what it should have been used for. It should be zero, right? There was one other thought I had. Oh, tags is a great idea. And I've been playing with tags in another client's account for a different reason, and they are proving to be a very helpful thing. So I know, are tags still in beta? Or are they out for everybody now?
It's just a funny thing to talk about. I've been playing around with tags. It's just so funny.
Well, and it feels so long ago that it started in beta, right? I mean, it feels like years and years ago, but it was like a month and a half, right? That some of us got, their first experience with tags as they go through it. It's still in beta to my knowledge.
I think there's a joke that I'm not getting here, but we'll talk about that off camera.
They usually are, Amy. They usually are.
I think the biggest thing for me with it is if I understand correctly, like Xero uses tags. I'm not a big Xero user, so I don't know if someone else can comment on that. But Xero has tags in different ways from that standpoint. We use QuickBooks a lot. They're in beta working on that piece, which I think is great. It's going to add a lot of functionality for this to be able to kind of work through all that space. But I think the hardest part about this always comes into place of who's handling the books, who's calculating it, who's managing it, who's watching it, how much, if you have an accountant, how much stewardship or ownership do they have over the control of how these funds are distributed and how they work through. I love the comment that Chris made about treating it like a restricted grant. For anybody who's worked with nonprofits or anybody who's received grants for different types of benefits or different types of things, there's a lot of process that you need to make sure you're mentally going through to treat it and account for it accurately. Verifying the balance, treating the dollars and cents the way that it should be, to organize it cleanly through the process. And ultimately, that's how this should be treated, because that's what it is, right? I mean, it's for potentially forgivable money that needs to be treated as if your life depends on keeping perfect records so that you can be forgiven. Because I think that's the piece that I'm seeing in a lot of articles I read. And I know we talk about this really heavily, but I've been reading a lot of articles where people are just like, well, I don't know what to do with it. I've got it, and now I'm not sure how to prepare for it, or how to track it, or how to log it, or we'll just leave it in our bank account and kind of just go, right? No, you can't do that. You have to treat this money like that perfect birthday or Christmas present, that brand new bike that you got that you don't want any sort of scuff or mark or anything on it, that you take it out and use it as it's meant to be, and then you put it back right in the box or whatever it is while you're going through it, because it's not yours for a moment. It's meant to be treated that way, that it's something that needs to be treated as I guess, as you could say, as a gift, not as just this frivolous free money on the shelf to do whatever the heck you want with.
We now know that Dan plays with all of his kids' gifts before he gives them to them.
I open up all my kids' Legos and then build everything and then I just end up pushing it. I just put it in a bigger box, fully assembled. That's all I do at the end.
They've never known that you actually get to put it together. They've always known that they come in
Exactly. Now you guys know what I do at work during the Christmas holiday.
So when you were talking about the process of whatever method you choose, documenting it, the first thing that came to my mind was realize that the person that you're going to be explaining this to may not be an accountant. They may be I kind of make it equivalent to a sales tax audit. They don't really know much about your business. They just know that if you don't have support for it, it's thrown out. So just document it. And yeah.
We are, in addition to the bank side, we are actually going to document everything via a spreadsheet as well. So we are creating one of these for each client with the amount of the loan in. We are tracking each week's payroll. We're tracking the full-time equivalent of employees in there as well. So that way we can have this when it gets to that recalculation time. We're also calculating that mortgage interest, rent, and utilities. And the other thing to remember on this is, even though these are covered expenses, the expectation is that these are not going to be forgiven if they exceed more than 25% of your loan. So one thing that this calculation does is it calculates how much of your loan you're using in mortgage interest, rent, and utilities. So if that percentage gets too high, you may not be able to get the rest of those, and you need to spend more on payroll versus those, even as money's running out.
Question, Jacob. Why have you not shared this with us?
I did share this.
I'm jealous.
Amy, I shared this with you and asked if you made this. I asked if you made a Google Sheet of this yet.
No, you did, and I'm going to use yours.
We don't need to now.
So this is shared. Obtain access to this spreadsheet if one is to inquire for it. I was just
the color scheme and the font can be changed a little bit.
I did not make this spreadsheet. It's got sent to me. I like the template. We are reworking it for our use, and that's why I have not shared my copy with you guys yet, because we are reworking.
Yeah, brand that sucker with your company logo and go.
You also might get 15 more Facebook views on this video if you give this out for free to people. So yeah, you can attach it or some sort of hyperlink, and
definitely. We're going to convert this to a Google Doc is what the goal is for us. We tried to convert it once and all the formulas and it broke. And since this had been sent to me and I wasn't fond of the color scheme, we're going to rework it. So
the yellow's great.
Needs a little bit more maroon on there. Yellow and blue, or yellow and green's a little Baylor Bear.
So we are doing that in addition to every other step, just so it's easy to calculate. It's easily summarized. So this will be one of the main documents we hand back to the bank and say, here's a summary of where that money went. And then we'll provide our supporting documentation for that to get there.
I was going to use my iPhone's calculator a lot, and notes, the notepad in iPhone. But I will see if I can use. I think a calculator like that is great. Now, I'd love to hear some advice. Let's say theoretically, you have a client who let go or furloughed most of their employees, and now they get the PPP loan, so they need to hire some people back, but they only need to hire back 7 or 8 people because their operations aren't fully open yet. They only have enough work to have half the team, let's say, rehired. What is your recommendation for clients like that, where like it's a restaurant, retail store where they can do some stuff, but they really can't fully reopen. So if they try to hire everybody back, they would basically be doing nothing. They would be paying them to do nothing. And those people are probably on unemployment right now, well, all the employees. And then second question is, how do they get people back that aren't ready to or don't want to come back yet because they're on that lucrative, tasty unemployment right now? So kind of the two question is, how do you help the clients who furloughed people, but their calculations were based on this full FTE count before they did the layoff, and now they have the money? How do you get it so that they have enough FTEs and payroll numbers to get that full forgiveness and take advantage of it? What recommendations do you guys have there?
Well, I'm gonna make. I have some thoughts on this. I think, this is the difficulty about this. How quickly all of this was put together is there's a lot of areas for people to be extremely dishonest, and I think this is one of those areas. I think I hate to admit to it because I think this is one of those areas that we have to, as accountants, have that mental communication and that thought process with our clients to say, I mean, you got to be fair, you got to be honest, you got to understand through this process. If you're tracking your money correctly and you're maintaining it, and you are supposed to have 15 FTEs and you only end up with 7 FTEs, theoretically, you should have that money left over. That's the excess that you now have the availability to pay your loan balance back without any complications, right? I mean, in that case, you did it the way you're supposed to, which is you used it to keep your business functioning with the resources that you could through that period of time. Now, if you're in a position where you shot yourself in the foot and there's not, you've spent all that money, you just now decided to take it on as a loan because you now don't have the valid proof through your documentation to go through that process. And why I think you have to be really careful with that is I think, we're going to hear years down the road, people, well, I hired my grandma to be on it because she emotionally supports me through the process and all that kind of stuff. That's not an FTE, and we need to be very careful, and we need to be very mindful that that's not how the system's meant to work. And there's people who are actually going to be greatly impacted because of this, if that's the way it is treated.
Sir, your cat does not have a W-9,
Yeah,
W-4 or I-9. You cannot have them as an employee.
but we share the same last name. How is that not possible, Macksey?
Dan, I think you summed that up. I don't think I've heard somebody summarize that succinctly. Do what you're supposed to do with the money. Don't spend what you're not, and then pay it back. Put it back into the system, pay it back.
Yeah.
And go on and build a big business and go forth.
Yeah. And if you are going to spend it intentionally or unintentionally on past bills, just know now you have a debt note at 1% for the next 2 years, and you have to be willing to live with that, right?
Well,
like
I think
there's no way around that. There's
right. And there's actually a potential big risk in that we need to look at. In the interim guidance, there is some language that basically means when the forgiveness calculations is done, if it's proven that you've spent that knowingly on unqualified expenses, they can call that portion of the loan and demand repayment then. So I would be very careful spending that on non-covered expenses intentionally, right? Like, obviously, if you can prove it was unintentional, then I think you probably have an argument case. But these funds should be preserved for covered expenses. Like, they should not be going to past due bills. And that's actually one of the biggest reasons I'm advocating for this money to go into a separate account, is because we all know business owners see that pile of money sitting in their account and they look at the pile of past due bills and they want to pay those past due bills. And that psychological piece is part of the big reason that I advocate for it to be in a separate account, is just the psychological aspect of the money's there. I should take care of the people I owe money to. And I don't want that to happen, because if you knowingly do that, that could suddenly become due in July. And we know these business owners are not going to have that money to just pay it back at that point.
I think to that same point, though, and I know we've talked about this half a dozen times also, and probably just beating a dead horse on this from that standpoint too, but the same thing needs to be said regarding how you bring employees back on as well. I mean, if you have 15 full-time employees and you really only need 7, don't just drag 15 people back into the office just to be present in the office. Like that, again, that doesn't put you in a good position, because now you pull them off unemployment, you're going to put them back in the office, and you're going to put them back on unemployment when all of this is said and done. And you didn't win, they didn't win. It just became a more complicated process through that as well, which is, I think, is why it's so important to make sure that you're thinking long-term through the strategies of how you're going to spend the money and how you're going to work through that process, and understanding the risks that associates with it across the board as well.
Yeah, if you've ever had if you're not a planner, now is the time to start. Plan it out and stay on top of it. I want to jump to the last piece. I know this might seem obvious to this group, but when you get when you get the money, the other side of that entry is you're creating a loan on your books, right?
Correct. Yes.
So perfect world, you use it for what you should. I just looked at Chris, he's got the shades on. When the part that's forgiven is going to need to be written off your balance sheet. If you are not the tax preparer, even if you are the tax preparer, when you write that off and you push it through other income, huge cap letters, put what that is for. So when it's time to prepare the taxes, it's not included in taxable income.
As a tax preparer, create a new chart of account for it. Just call it other income, PVP loan, forgiveness, because per the code, it's a non-taxable income item. And if you lump it in other income and you have lots of other income, it will very likely get missed. And many people may get grants through this thing. Some of them will be taxable, some will not. So I think having that clear definition of, maybe normally I'm not an advocate for having extra chart of accounts out there. This is one of those rare times that I say, if we don't have that separate chart of account, my guess is at tax time it gets missed and you're going to get taxed on it.
Yeah, good point. Below the line, highly labeled, highly description with backup.
Yeah. We decided.
Emojis in there too.
What was that?
Throw a couple emojis in that chart of account line too. Really make it stand out.
Yeah. We discussed and decided that we're going to treat them all as long-term debt to start, and we're going to have a parent account that says, economic stimulus funds or whatever it is. So if there's $10,000, EIDL grants that come in, if there's PPP, if there's there's some Medicare grants that have come in from that standpoint as well, or anything that comes through, they're all getting their own separate lines on the chart of accounts in the balance sheet, because we want to make sure that we're utilizing those funds and releasing them in accordance with the use that they're assigned and associated with. And I think our intent and hope with that too is that it gives us some more framework and expectation for follow-up with CPAs and with the clients, also to keep them accountable through that process as well, just to be able to make sure that we're properly moving it through cleanly and accurately, so it doesn't become a major issue.
Yeah, this is really going to be a lot of fun to account for. We're trying to decide what method we're going to use for it, and like the pros and cons for all of them. And my God, like even I want to do the restricted grant and the separate bank account method, but like just the thought of like having to move that over into like long-term debt and then the long-term liability, like all of the,
you're going to have the long-term liability no matter what, because to bring the funds in, you have the loan, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So it actually made it a lot easier for us, because the one main bank we're working with is automatically opening a new checking account up. Yeah. So either we have to transfer it all out, or we just do the transfer one by one. So it's a really easy jump to say, well, the account's already created, let's use it. It would be much harder if they were not doing that.
Well, guys, sounds like a great update. And Jacob will be sharing that secret spreadsheet hopefully with us.
It needs cleaned up a little bit first, but we'll get that cleaned up.
That he claims to have shared with us on the 9th, but I don't think that's true. Whatever. Sure.
Zach does have a nice history there. One final update, and Dan did post, I believe it was Dan posted something in the comment section. If you normally owe on your taxes And as a result, or you normally get a check refund, the IRS has published a portal where you can register your direct deposit information for your economic impact stimulus payment. So your $1,200 stimulus payment, there is a portal to do that. I will warn that we tried to use it for a couple clients and it wasn't letting you enter direct deposit information yet, but it is supposed to be coming and that link is there. So I just wanted to throw that out there that Dan posted.
So it wasn't working this morning. I know there was a lot of people who were getting, even 404 errors and things from that standpoint, but it has worked in the last about 5 or 6 hours for a handful of people that I know. And so I think it's one of those, just depends on how quickly and how many people are applying or trying to push through it.
It was working to find the status of your payment if you had a payment on the way, but it was not letting us register new direct deposit information yet. So that's out there. You can also find out if you have not received it and you were expecting it, you should be able to find the status of your payment and when it's coming as well.
Yeah, the other thing that I think that is a kind of if I can add one more topic to this today, it's a question that I've gotten twice today. And then I saw a Facebook post from one of my clients venting about it today. And then I see that it's in the comments here as well. And that is the catch-22 that we are now all in the middle of, that is slowly dawning on the clients of, I have this PPP fund, this PPP funding now. All of my employees are currently on unemployment. They are getting, it depends on the state, but in Massachusetts, they're eligible for up to half of their normal wages, plus the $600, regardless if they're part-time or full-time.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to get all of my employees back from unemployment that don't want to work because they're getting the $1,200? They could be eligible for the $1,200. So that reduces some of their financial concerns, as well as the unemployment and their normal UI benefits. And I'm telling them that they can come back to work for their normal rate. So there's like a weird
differential.
There's not a weird range. It's just a range of people that are making minimum wage to, I think, 15 or 16 bucks an hour, that are currently making more money than they would if they came back to work.
Yeah.
And I think my answer to that is, yep, that's weird.
You're going to have employees not ready to come back or who will not want to for a variety of reasons, including fear of getting COVID-19, or I have a kid at home, or I have to take care of my sick grandma or whatever, or I have a lot of anxiety. And right now, many states have a lot of freedoms of, if somebody wants to stay home because they're afraid to go back to work, they can stay home and we will keep paying, we will keep covering them. I mean, unless you report them to unemployment, which, I don't think employers are going to do, you put them in unemployment in the first place. So somebody asked that question. I think there's a lot of challenges there to try to convince somebody to come back when they've been laid off. They, as an employee, were probably completely unaware of PPP. They have no idea what you're talking about. They're like, what money? What are you talking about? You have money to pay me now? Wait, can you guarantee that I work after 8 weeks? Do I have to come back and then just go
back to the end of the unemployment line?
Yeah. Are you kidding me? I don't want to go through that again. I just got through the unemployment phone center or website. It took me 3 weeks just to get unemployment on there. You kidding me? No way. That's going to be really challenging. You're right. That's a weird thing.
I'll do the technical answer. The technical answer is, if you call them back to work and they don't come back, they've effectively quit, which means they're uneligible for unemployment. And if you make that report to the unemployment office, their unemployment benefits will end.
But that's a difference. That's a difference between, if you furloughed them, yes, but if you let them go, if you laid them off, they're on unemployment.
Yeah.
So if you furloughed them, yes. I mean, then you have that power.
Yeah.
Now
It
the
all
problem is a lot
depends
of-
on that first conversation, right? I mean, it really does. If you just said,
Yes.
hey, we don't have service or money or work or whatever, good luck, Godspeed
Right.
and wish you the best.
So
We hope we can bring you back at some point in time. There's no type of guidelines. And I think this actually depends on state too. And I think
Yes.
that's something that's important
Yes.
to look into in depth as well.
but there are a lot of people out there that want to work. They just don't want to collect unemployment.
Yeah.
Their mentality is don't want to collect unemployment.
Yeah.
So just to be blunt, if your employees don't want to come back, maybe it's time to upgrade your workforce.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and-
that's absolutely
Sounded like a
true.
mic drop, didn't it?
Yeah,
Um,
the unemployment rate is what, 11% right now as of like last week. So, there's people that are going to be looking to work that don't want to be on unemployment
Right.
and can't
And-
stand sitting at home.
Yeah.
And you tell that to your employees if they don't want to come back. Look, if you don't take this offer, there may not be a job here when you want to come back to work.
Yeah.
Not guaranteeing anything.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that is they're also going to say, well, I collect federal pandemic unemployment insurance until July 30th. So I got that many weeks of $600 a month. But is that really guaranteed? Ohio announced today without federal bailout, their unemployment insurance fund is going to go bankrupt in June. California's kind of in the same boat. So if the state funds go bankrupt, you're not getting anything on unemployment.
Wow.
Now, I was presented with the worst possible situation from an employee's perspective the other day, where the person was part-time, great employee. The company is getting a PPP. They want to bring the person back. The person wants to be able to take care of their kids, and so their options right now are like that person could stay on unemployment, take care of their children, or they could come back to work and make their part-time rate, or they could go on the paid family leave for 10 weeks and make 2/3 of their normal part-time rate. And so the employer wants to be able to bring this person back so that they get their FTEs. That person, who would want to come back with that option and make 2/3 of their part-time rate?
Right.
Like when you're making $600, like that is the worst possible situation that you could possibly be in right now. And there's no good answer for it. Like they did not think of that scenario.
And
Like,
that's a huge concern is these people who don't want to come back could come back and immediately pull the FMLA card.
Yeah.
So you go through all the work to get them back and then they just pull the FMLA card and say, no, I'm not working still. And now you can't fire them, right? Like you are stuck dealing with the FMLA side. I'm saying stuck, right? But you are stuck dealing with the FMLA side. And what was the point in bringing them off unemployment to just go on FMLA? You achieved nothing. If that person communicated it with you and you had an open conversation with that employee, just to be blunt here, you would be better off hiring a new person and letting that person sit on unemployment. Your FTE calculation would have been fulfilled. That employee would have been better off because they would have collected more on unemployment than they would have on FMLA. And somebody else who maybe wasn't eligible for unemployment or et cetera now has a better role. So those are complex situations, which there probably is no right answer besides over
this is
communicating.
going to be the worst situation for human resource professionals ever. Like
They're as busy as we are as accountants.
yeah, there are correct answers, but they are not good answers.
Yeah.
But I think that's a part that's important with this too, is we talk a lot about the business owner side, we talk a lot about the accountant side and making sure that they're both protected. These people who are on unemployment or being furloughed or going through that, they also have to be thinking about this process as well. They have to be thinking about, well, how long can I maintain and keep unemployment? What types of things should I be aware of that I'm going to get, or benefits or things from that standpoint? At the end, what kind of job am I going to try to work for? Do I like my employer? Do I not? I mean, they ultimately have to consider all of those circumstances. And now that we're also hearing for different states who are closing schools completely through the remainder of the school year. So everything's going to be homeschooled from this standpoint. There's a lot of complex conversations that individuals have to have about this as well in determining, can we survive with lower compensation for even those people who are on unemployment and are making less than what they could if they went back to work, to be able to cover their certain circumstance? And does that mean they have to change their lifestyle? And if so, we're definitely going to still see an impact on the economy with that from that standpoint too, because they're not going to be spending in the ways that they were before, because they're having to take care of their family or certain other things and obligations and commitments that aren't going to allow them to be able to be put back in those positions to go back to work. And so I think we got a lot of very complex situations across the board that everybody needs to be thinking about this, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a business owner, if you're just an employee. I mean, if you work at a sandwich shop, you need to be thinking about this, because it actually can impact you extremely heavily with what your life position's like going to be over the next 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some people are commenting on Facebook that some states have no distinction between laid off and furlough. There's no way to actually determine that. And the interesting thing is that furlough, generally, it seems to me, it's kind of a health insurance thing where you can keep people on health insurance, and so that they don't have to get off. But from a state perspective, it's really, a laid off person's a laid off person, or hour reduction. They all kind of fit in those same categories to qualify for unemployment. And then there's this new category of childcare up to $200 a day, which is a completely separate category that no state ever had. So it's this new category that's completely new. But be human, be flexible, Marissa says, and entice people, call people who want to work. And there are going to be plenty of people, as Chris said, out there who will want to work. They don't care how much they're getting paid to sit at home. Being at home is boring for them, or is anxiety filled enough for them. They'd rather be playing a role in helping the economy come back to work and helping your small business come back to work.
And the one last piece of advice that I have is that, as a business owner and as a someone that is in the accounting profession, one of the areas that grays the fastest is the difference between accounting and human resources and payroll. And the best thing that we ever did was to partner with a human resources company that I can defer all those questions to and ask that person all of those questions, so that I'm not on the hook for the human resources questions. Like that, and I believe that Michael Lee is a co-owner of a human resources company.
Yeah.
So try to find somebody that you can partner with, that you can ask all of these crazy questions, because there's billions of them right now.
Great point. If you are an accountant that tries to white glove above and beyond for your clients, this is not the time to try to learn to be an HR professional. And you're right, Chris, it's easy to step into that arena because it's number driven. Go talk to the experts.
Yeah. I was actually, my last comment on this one too, I know we need to wrap up, is I was talking to one of our payroll providers today, and there was a lot of conversation even from them that says, we're seeing a lot of people increasing their package or their service with those providers to include the HR package, because that allows them to be able to get those questions answered and have those people and those resources available. And in a lot of cases, it's not hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month. It may cost them an additional $100 a month. And in that case, for 2 months, $200, though it's in some cases a large expense, to be able to make sure that you're communicating correctly to your employees, to make sure that you're communicating correctly to your people you're bringing back on, is much more important than risking that potential situation where you're going to get burned by saying the wrong thing or communicating the wrong thing or setting the wrong expectation.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and check your bank accounts for your stimulus check from the IRS if you qualified, or in the mail. And also, hopefully you can take this advice on how to track your PPP loan from the SBA for full forgiveness. And let's hope and pray that the federal government is able to add some more funds, as there are thousands and thousands and thousands more small businesses requesting funds to keep their small businesses going. But other than that, hope to see you guys tomorrow. We'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.